Ready? Can we call the meeting to order? Roll call.
All right, very good. Chair Wertz is absent this evening. Vice Chair Yant. Here. Tony Bevel.
Here.
Dorian Leibel.
Here.
Lisa Patterson will be arriving a little bit later. Diane Foster here and Mike Smith.
Here.
All right, great, thank you.
Do we want to do the vote on the last month's minutes? Can I get a motion to approve the August meetings minutes?
Make a motion to approve August meetings minutes with August or July. We do.
Oh, was it July? Okay,
Yeah.
okay. I'll second. Great. Can I hear yeas?
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay. Minutes are approved. And then we're gonna go a little bit out of order with the new business, and we're gonna do our new item, 2022-10 St. Charles Way, request for no parking signs by the walking path and the mailboxes. And I think we have an in-person comment or explanation.
Yeah,
So,
we just need you to state your name for the record, please.
my name is Joseph Perkins. I live at 23266 Southwest St. Charles Way, Sherwood, Oregon.
Thank you.
So, please allow me to speak of relevant and irrelevant information related to this investigation and share information about my role in this matter. I myself like to be considerate of neighbors and even more of neighborhood. I keep my property and surrounding properties clean and well maintained. There is a neighborhood post box on our property. I keep it clean, free of moss and dirt. At the request of 2 female neighbors, I put down ground liner and pebbles so that the neighbors will not have to walk in mud that surrounds the post box. There is an easeway parallel to our home that extends from the street to the Archer Glen School sport field. I regularly clean the path of debris and weeds, including dog poop that neighbors sometimes leave behind. Now, about the issue of the blind spot that a vehicle parked on the street in front of my house creates. Years ago, I had given thought to why I should park my van on the street. I saw that some drivers go faster than others. I assumed that some are driving above the speed limit. I'm concerned about the safety of everyone. Especially worrisome for us is our daughter who lives with us. She is 28 years old. She has a disability, cerebral palsy, and mentally delayed. She needs constant supervision. We are aware that an accident could be if she wandered off and ran into the street. So for safety, I park my van on the street. Together with the cars parked across the street, they create a bottleneck, forcing drivers to slow down and safely navigate the physical barrier. I don't believe a crosswalk or a sign will change some people's driving behavior. I believe the path was made in 1996, the same year when our home was built. I have lived at this address since 2008. I park my cargo van mostly on the street. I haven't done any research, but I'm pretty sure that there's never been an accident of a vehicle or pedestrian since the path was made. If this is true, then I think the history of the neighborhood section proves it to be safe as it is. Of the options the safety committee will be considering, if a no parking zone is imposed for the space in front of my home, I'm requesting that I receive permission to continue to use this space for loading and unloading of materials needed for home maintenance. and for furniture and other goods. So I'm asking if that be the case, that I get permission to at least use it as a loading unloading zone. That's all I have. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we able to watch the videos, or do I just assume that everybody watched the videos that we review them?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I know.
I've
I'm
never
not
seen
prepared. I'm not prepared to.
Oh,
Sure.
Oh. I can share it.
yeah, they're real short.
I can show people on the phone.
Yeah.
See if you can bring it up. I'll watch it this afternoon.
You don't see.
So I can give you a little context on those videos that may
Yes,
be
please.
helpful. And before I get to that, just want to introduce Chris Pierce at the table. Chris Pierce, one of our officers of Shore Police. And specifically, you may see him coming to more of our meetings just due to the fact that Chris is assigned to our traffic division. So he is our traffic enforcement officer. It doesn't mean that other officers don't perform that function, but that is Chris's primary function. So my thought is, why not bring someone who's really expert in the field to kind of be here for us as a resource. So, Chris, thank you for being here. Chris. Appreciate it. With that said, those videos that we sent and the photos that we sent to you at that location, which is like just outside of this gentleman's residence here, you'll see that in the video. He probably laughed at those. You're like, why is Captain Dano down on one knee, bended knee? But we're just trying to give a representation more of probably the height of a juvenile that would be coming down that pathway from the Archer school property. You'll see that that location, if you take the van aspect out of it, just that the way the bend is right there at that road, it is very hard to see a person who would come out from the walkway onto the roadway. And if there was any vehicle there, even a small vehicle, a neighbor's vehicle, anyone's vehicle parked there, just difficult to see. The other things you'll notice in those photos and of those videos is that obviously you have the sidewalk that's on the other side of the street. So there is no sidewalk on the side that has the van. The first time that I went to the location to just observe it myself, drove by once and twice, and on the third time when I came by, actually happened to be a young juvenile that was standing at the front of the vehicle. He could see my car approaching down the road. I couldn't see him until just like you saw in the video, that last second you see the person. So that juvenile was waiting there to wait for me to pass before he would walk by the van and then continue down the road. So definitely is a site obstruction there. Like I said, the van or any car is going to cause it at that location. So we can take any questions you have from our experience from being out there.
I mean, you're seeing it as site obstruction. Do you think it's definitely a hazard the way it is with the van or with any car?
Yeah, and I'll take van out of it, and I'll take this gentleman. Anyone could be parked in there, right? Could be gone, and anyone could be parked in there. It is a hazard due to the fact that there is no sidewalk on that side of the street. Definitely is a bit of an issue right there. Now, in regards to solutions, obviously the discussion point on the request that came in for us to look at this was the suggestion of no parking. Obviously, that is one. Other things that we've noticed when Chris and I were there is that safely getting kids to the other side of the street where the sidewalk is really should be something that you would look at as an important aspect. Having someone walk just around the van and then around each vehicle as you go down that street side there with no sidewalk is gonna be more dangerous than just trying to funnel people over to the other side where the sidewalk is. Other things that came up is that walkway as it comes down from the school property down to the street is a downhill slope. If you have people that are on bikes or you have people on skateboards or other devices, if you don't stop at the road edge, you're gonna be right into the roadway. So those would be other suggestions that we would put on the table, would be for some kind of alerts or things like that that could at least slow someone down before they suddenly are into traffic. So there's different options there. And I do realize that there's lots of corners and bends on lots of streets. That's the other thing that we also recognize and see, and we understand that parking is a premium throughout any city street. And so there's always an impact when we start to change those as well. So a lot to consider.
I drove by there earlier today. You know, Mr. Perkins says he's got 3 vehicles. He's got a huge RV that also blocks the path, and the van and a smaller car. And today he had all 3 of them parked in his driveway off the street. And Bob, you had mentioned the basketball standard there. That has been removed. So that's no longer an issue. I mean, I don't know if Mr. Perkins is willing to just park all of his vehicles in his driveway all the time. And stop backing up and obstacle the traffic. And that's not really his job.
Yeah, you know, from a police department perspective, we can't require him or anyone that lives there to park a certain type of vehicle or not on the roadway. And like I said, the van, obviously a van's going to produce more of an obstruction. But any vehicle, in my opinion, from the videos that we did from the drive-by is going to produce an obstruction there. And we have no recourse to make anyone not park in that location, park on their driveway. So
Yeah,
we have really no recourse there.
necessarily they could even like jut out into the street a little bit off their driveway because they're not blocking any walkway. There's no
True.
like, right of way path there, so.
You'd be required to have your vehicle onto your driveway, but you're right. The big hazard is even if we take Mr. Is it Perkins or Perkins? Sorry, if we take him out of the equation, it's just anyone could park there, right? So that hazard and that spilling out onto literally from that walkway right onto a roadway is definitely a hazard. Thoughts on?
We have a couple of conditions like this across the city, which is what I was looking at on my maps, just to refresh my memory. Northwest Century or Southwest Century Drive, it's a mid-block crossing. We actually have restricted parking on either side of the crossing zone. And we've striped the crossing and signed it as such as a pedestrian crossing, just to provide additional visual acuity towards that. It is a public street, public parking, allowed on both sides. So, the fact that it's on a corner makes it difficult, obviously. But I think along with the conditions for the use of the trail and the fact that it crosses the street at a midpoint, and it's primarily for school children, I would say that it might be appropriate to stripe the curb line 20 feet on either side of the bed crossing, and as no parking, have it signed appropriately, and put in a striped head crossing with signage that notifies it is a pedestrian crossing. At that point, I think 20 feet with a traditional a standard 25-mile-an-hour speed limit on a corner, which would be less, given the conditions of the roadway with cars and the narrowness, slow it down considerably. Should be an adequate zone where kids who are coming out onto the street would be able to see the cars, and the drivers would actually know that there's a ped crossing zone there and would be warned about that, and we should be on the lookout. I think that's a reasonable, that it's cost effective. Doesn't take a lot of money to put the striping down or the signage that basically warns people that, it's a ped crossing.
And I would say from our perspective, the police department, I would agree 100% with Bob and what he's saying of the ped crossing there is appropriate. I would say if that pathway didn't exist, this would be a different discussion. It would be just another bend in a road in a residential area. And I think to mirror what Bob is saying, is the uniqueness of the fact that you have a pathway, and not only just a pathway, but a pathway coming from a school. That makes it kind of unique. I think that's what you're saying as well. Sure. I would think, would you have any thoughts in regards to what the gentleman said in regards to the loading zone aspects?
Well,
On that?
here's the deal. If you're going to put a no parking zone in, it's no parking for everyone. Because as soon as you say, okay, I'm gonna have a special parking district where this person can park there exclusively for them, I don't know how you're gonna enforce it. And if you say, no, he's special, he can park there, then you put in all this things to try and prevent everything, and then you still allow it to occur. In other words, you're trying to prevent an accident from occurring, but you allow the condition to possibly exist still. If you're gonna do it, you're gonna do it. So special parking privileges, once it's established, you basically say, nope, nobody gets parking within 20 feet either side of this crossing. And that assures the safety of the ped crossing. We put all the signage, striping, everything, and the rest of the street's open, park wherever you can. And that's gonna be a problem. It's got I saw the RV, it's big. And, it's just, sorry.
So I would put one additional thing to that as well, is that, and I agree with what Bob was saying, is that, yeah, you don't want to have kind of parking, kind of not.
Yeah.
So Bob's spot on there. I think that one of the observations that we noticed when we were out there though, is that the obstruction is definitely in that space that is that, you said about 20 feet where the van is parked. So in that location, the other side of the crosswalk, and I don't know what Chris, which direction would that be for me, but the other side of it doesn't seem to have an obstruction for traffic either way at that point.
Whoever stood in it, treated the same.
Yep.
If you have a question about it, go drive by Century Drive and look at the mid-block crossing, because that's what this is. It's a ped mid-block crossing. And the standards for that is you don't park within a certain distance of that ped crossing, either side, going north and south.
Which is an importance with safety.
We're not doing anything different.
Nothing I mean.
It's just a way of protecting pets crossing the street and giving the vision a corridor that they need.
Chris, do you have any additional?
No, big block crossing seems like the best solution. 20 feet on either side.
I'm not clear on you've got the crossing in 20 feet on either side of the painted lines.
So the trail comes out, yeah, there'll be stripes going across the road. So it's gonna be like a crosswalk, just in the middle of the street, not attached to an intersection. That way kids can walk on the trail, cross to the sidewalk on the other side of the street. And then, yeah, nobody will be able to park within 20 feet of that cross line on either side of the street.
So a little bit of parking goes away for Mr. Perkins.
Oh, yes, definitely.
And for the other
And
neighbors.
there are any other neighbors or.
Around it, yes.
So really 4 houses will be affected.
Oh, outside the street. Yeah.
I'd say 4 parking spaces would be,
Yeah,
because.
I don't know, anybody can park anywhere along that street they so choose.
Yeah, it might have to go a little bit more than 20 feet, because I think 20 feet would put it just past his driveway, like the end of it would be.
I think we're gonna try and maximize it. You can't put it in front of his driveway, he's gotta be able to get out, but you can't park in front of somebody's driveway anyway, so that's an
Right.
additional area where you can say, yeah, it's not part of the parking structure, but basically, if it was curb line, I would just say, sorry, the 20 feet on either side for that speed zone, for the narrowness of the road is adequate. Now, I would recommend that be presented to city manager for consideration.
It would be, I mean, it would definitely be fair that way, just like singling out one person.
It takes care of the situation as a unit, this issue is not one side, one spot. It's how do you treat the whole thing?
Is it plausible to, if you put up the no parking sign, and you see it all over places like in downtown Portland, you have no parking, and underneath it, 15-minute loading zone? Is that legal, possible to do, or you just have a 15-minute sign there? Because that's legal in Portland, but I don't know if that's.
Again, I think the statement comes down, whether it's legal or not is up to the police department, how we treat it. But if you're saying, well, maybe I'm gonna do a 15-minute loading right at the time when the kids come out.
Yeah.
You've defeated the purpose of making it a no parking zone in the first place. You can't control when he's gonna do that. You can't tell him, okay, you can only do it between the hour of 1:30 and 2 and 5 o'clock and 5:15.
Right,
He's gonna wanna be able to do it whenever he wants. And,
or whoever.
or whoever is gonna wanna park there for 15 minutes at any point in the day automatically reestablishes the criteria for that issue that we're trying to fix. So I wouldn't go there.
Well, what are your thoughts on the bollard in the path, to slow kids? And
I have yet to see I will say, I have yet to see that. I saw one kid riding a bike on the sidewalk down by Stellos Park, hit one of the light posts that was set in right in the middle of the sidewalk. I'm not sure how that occurred, but he did do it. Long time ago.
And do it
I got comments on that, but I'll keep those quiet. 4 weeks ago, I ruined that perfect record here. I don't see a benefit to that. Usually, it's not the pedestrian traffic that we're trying to prevent using the pathway with bollards. What we're trying to do is prevent automotive traffic from using the pathway as an alternative to getting to the backyard or something like that. That's why we established the bollards, because a person can go around it, no problem. Shouldn't be a problem. The bollard itself should be set up such that it doesn't cause a problem for bicyclists. You don't want somebody getting it at speed. I think, again, when you talk about bicyclists, they have the same responsibility as drivers for understanding rules of the road and obeying those rules, which means when they come to an intersection, entering a street on the side path, they are to stop before entering. They have an obligation to stop, look, and listen. And that bollard does nothing to change that, but a bollard does change it if we have a vehicle who wants to go down and use that pathway for.
I was thinking more in terms of particularly as a grade speed. Thinking more in terms of skateboarders. It's when they're down there, not slow down because they're kids.
Again, the idea is, what is our standard for that? If you really want to stop them and make them do it, then you put in a channelized entry point with a chain link fence here,
followed by chain link fence there, followed by chain link fence here. And basically they have to go around, around, to get out. I can do that. That'll stop them. But they'll have to figure out how to get their bikes through it. Basically, that is, Pollard won't do that. Again, Pollard is different. So if you really want something where you're forcing skateboarders, bicyclists, everybody else to stop before they get in there, or even the student walking, joggers don't like them, guarantee that. We can do that. It's how much you want to go into it. And has there been a problem? If there's a problem along that way, then I'd say, yeah, we got to figure it out. But if we have not had any reported incidences, then I wouldn't start borrowing to look towards that for that reason.
Would this upgrade necessitate ramps and truncated domes on either end, or is it just continentals and signs?
I think because we are not treating it as a collector or arterial road, we could possibly get away without having the truncated ADA because there is no sidewalk adjacent to it. So I think we can get away with not having it be an ADA, but we have to have truncated domes and meet all the grading requirements, things like that. I think it's basically striving for visual.
I'll add one additional thing in regards to the bollards and that aspect. I agree with Bob. They're not going to necessarily stop someone. A serpentine type concept is definitely going to be a safer aspect. I think the uniqueness of this is that, and just as Bob says, we would look at it as, yeah, anyone's going to have to know to stop before they enter the roadway. I think the uniqueness here is that there's no sidewalk on that side of the road. So anyone who is coming down, and the gentleman who spoke when we talked to him that day, he did talk about skateboarders coming down, etc. Uniqueness is that you're, as a person on a bike or a skateboard or one of those types of devices with wheels, you don't have any warning that you're suddenly transitioning from a pathway directly on a roadway, as opposed to seeing that you're coming to a sidewalk and then expecting that cushion, I guess, before you're in the road. So say take that into consideration as well.
I like the idea of the pedestrian crossing there because I've actually walked that a number of times with my family. We live like Middleton, but to get to Old Town, we cut through that way. And I'll be honest that I never knew that there was that path to Archer Glen. Because we use it just to walk through, or not really, we've driven down there a little bit, we use it as a walkthrough, and I never was aware that that happened through there. So it makes a ton of sense even just for anybody coming into that neighborhood, even just to be aware that people could be coming out. Because I think if you're not living on that street, you probably wouldn't even be aware it was there.
Bob, is that pathway owned by the city or that be owned by the
Probably city. Yeah, if it was done with the subdivision. We've got a lot of pathways within the city that are done with the subdivision to try to get that connectivity. Between the subdivisions.
Continuing across the street.
Yeah.
Along the stream.
Correct. So, yeah, there's a lot of pathways throughout the city. So I think it's just part of that system.
That's all we got.
I hate to take parking away from it, but see a choice.
Well, it's not all the way from the mailbox at least.
Yeah,
So
And Bob is also correct on, you don't have accident crash data that's location, so positive.
But even just thinking about, or just other surrounding school areas, where sort of we know kids are directly leaving the school premises, most of the time, they're crossing at some kind of a crosswalk somewhere.
Yeah.
Like even up by Middleton, they're crossing at crosswalks to get across to another
another safe spot of travel pedestrian.
Again, I think the concept of just striping and painting some for parking zone, putting up a couple of signs. I think that is gonna be adequate for what our intent is. The rest of it's just gonna have to be, public education.
So is that a zone now?
If it's a residential street, it's 25.
We want to add, if we're gonna strike that, would we add the tactile, the ADA
No.
tactile services? No.
Because there's no sidewalk there, pedestrian crossing, it's not ADA compliant currently.
So this is like if you're going along the path and crossing St. Charles Way and then to the other path, I guess,
Yes,
that's ain't there.
yes.
But the curb is at grade. So there's
Yeah,
no,
there's no distinction really. I think it's roll over curve.
yeah.
There's no sidewalk, planter strip,
Mhm.
right of ways at the back end of the curb line.
Oh,
It's,
it is.
it's tight. It's old design that
Mhm.
the city no longer does.
Okay. Would those be school crossing signs then? Is it close enough to the
No.
school? No, it'd just be regular pedestrian crossing.
That is true. Yeah.
Okay.
Do we want to vote on the proposed changes that we're talking about? Do we want to hold off?
Who's sent it to, right? To be,
City
we just make
manager?
recommendations.
Your recommendation goes to the city
City
manager.
manager.
That we recommend to the city manager to sign and strike the crossing.
Second.
Great. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Okay, passes. Great. So then moving back up to business. Okay, review of TSC process manual and menu of the traffic safety options. It's just like a refresher course on what we're doing. These are the new.
I know, yeah. Just, I thought everybody had an opportunity to already look it over, if they had any questions or anything. I was just kind of rereading it myself and, was reminded of a few things. But
I think examples were helpful with DMG, the page one, is that what I'm looking? Page one examples, and I think the case that we just did was a perfect example of kind of a second set of bullet points halfway down on that page one, examples of issues that will be handled. People speeding in neighborhoods, vehicles not stopping at stop signs, vehicle movement that requires control measures such as stop signs, or just example here, crosswalk and no parking related issues and then parking related issues. So I think it was a great example of those. I think some of the ones above that that will not be addressed in this committee were those. Bob, maybe you can speak to this a bit, but the planning design concepts, correct? And probably better vocabulary in regards to explaining those things.
Oh, well.
But those larger style,
Yeah.
those larger issues, larger
There's a different venue for dealing with traffic issues that are more regional. When I say regional, it's more being on the main thoroughfares and stuff like that that we have, that are part of that would be more appropriately handled through a capital improvement project, which is controlled by our traffic system plan, transportation system plan. Our recommendation has been submitted to city manager and my boss, public works director, that they perform a new transportation system plan analysis, not this fiscal year, we're already into it, but we set aside funds to perform that TSP update starting next fiscal year and incorporate all these issues as part of that analysis, make sure that we copied it or we captured it, not just in the areas that have been identified by complaints, but any other similar areas that come up. We might as well get everything on the table that we can so that we have it completely identified. Then we can assign priorities to it and then work it through the system to capture it as we go.
So Bob, like example of like a redesign of a traffic circle or something that would be something that we wouldn't address here and it would be something we would address.
Generally speaking, the complaints that you're going to be getting is, like, I think there was one that came in that we saw recently, we were talking about the intersection of Sunset and Highway 99 and how that needs to have the left turn taken out, redone. No, I don't think that's going to happen at this level. What I do think is going to happen is that we know that that doesn't work well and that the TSP, the update, will review that and actually come up with a plan that says, here's how you're going to basically solve that. We put that into a capital improvement project listing that comes out of the TSP and it gets prioritized and we get it done through that. I don't think that this committee should be focusing on how to do structural reconstructions of that size. It's just, yes, I think it's good to acknowledge it, but support the process by which we handle it as a community where it's appropriate. I think the smaller ones, again, the ones where people worry about parking, signage, that some of these things with striping, perfect. I think that's great. But when we start talking about wholesale reconstruction, design, construction of intersections, that starts to get way beyond what we're doing. And I think that we'll acknowledge it, but I think the appropriate place is to put it into the capital improvement project plan scenario, which comes to the TSP, which is basically next year.
Not ignore, redirect.
Not ignored. It's not ignored. No, the fact is that I in my department, along with Public Works and the city manager, we have a long list of complaints, items we've identified, things that we know about, things that we keep finding out that, we'd love to go through and say, well, let's get it done now. But the process means we have to have it to expend city funds that way. We have to have it on a capital improvement project list. It has to be adopted, it has to be, set aside for funds. And the only way we can get it on the CIP generally is through the TSP. I think if it's a direct safety issue, like somebody's going to get hurt immediately, we'll know it, we'll get it squared away, make it a priority. But generally speaking, these ones that are more long-term, larger projects where we're trying to improve and increase based on city growth, expansion services, how traffic patterns are changing as roadways get developed and areas get expanded. The TSP is the methodology and the tool we're using to basically use and support. So if you guys have any questions about what I've just said, I'll have to switch to a different gear because my brain isn't functioning too well right now.
So where is it to the PSP? During the first iteration of this committee, we talked about the roundabout at Lightyears.
Correct.
And
That was an identified safety concern because we had a recent incident there. And we did do a review, we did it with the police department. Police department made a finding on that accident itself. And the review done by our firm, transportation engineering firm, did a review. Also came back, basically, saying that the system was designed correctly. Designed correctly. Now, is it 100% foolproof? There's no transportation system, segment, anything that's 100% safe. Can't be. A lot of that stuff just doesn't work, and not to that level. But according to the design parameters that are federally, we use federal design standards, so we're using the best that we can, best knowledge, best expertise. If we meet those standards, we're pretty guaranteed that if people follow the proper driving procedures, that they'll be able to maneuver through that system safely. It's when they start doing other things, or there are other factors involved that you just you can't deal with. There's nothing you can do about it. Then the possibility of accidents occur.
I think additionally to go to your question, please correct me if I'm wrong. If we were dealing with a traffic circle that did require a redesign, I think per the mandate of this team, that would be something that would not be before this team to try to work that through and figure that out.
No,
Well, that's kind of what your question is, right? You're like,
you would be supporting, you would be recommending support for having a review done by the city as dictated by the city manager through the TSP. The TSP would be performed and be able to identify those conditions and say if it is deficit or not, which is what we're supposed to do. And then any corrective measures would be identified through the TSP, and that would be a capital improvement plan that would be adopted by the city council and then ranked accordingly through the budgeting committee, and then we go through and basically can go through and design and reconstruct based on the ranking that comes out of both city council and the budget committee.
so I'm just trying to get closure on it, because my recollection is our recommendation was to switch that from a 2-lane roundabout to a 1-lane because of confusion with the signage, et cetera. And so now what I'm hearing is based on the study that was done, that's not going to happen.
The option of converting it from a 2-lane roundabout to a 1-lane roundabout, let's go back to the original assumption of what it was designed around, which is a 2-lane roundabout that had traffic counts done based on future development in the area, full build out. So that was conservative at best. So the roundabout, I think, is over-designed. What happens is that we are trying to get people to, we're trying to control driver behavior to a better extent. Now signage, there are some items that we did make clear, we did correct. Conversion of a 2-lane roundabout into a 1-lane roundabout was trying to actually force driver behavior to a greater extent. And the concept is, yes, that's going to work, but as development occurs, and the development is occurring out there, it's occurred since the Langers moved in, it's Walmart, everything, we're starting to hit capacity that was sort of generated by the original analysis that we had. So if we go to a lane roundabout and we force people into driving the way they should be through there, we're creating backup scenarios and then we're changing traffic conditions at the vertical. We've created another issue. So the concept of converting it to a one-lane roundabout in the interim went away because the traffic volume was high enough not to warrant it again. We were creating another issue with, okay, we force everybody down into a single lane. Now everybody's starting to back up and complain about getting in, trying to get through the traffic circle and on and on and on. So we backed away from the single lane roundabout because we were hitting those traffic volumes that warranted a two-lane, which is what we have.
Thank you. I just never heard the final resolution of that.
Yeah, that's where we're at. It's been a moving, it takes so long that we actually, development has occurred at such a pace that we've met almost our build out scenario about 20 years earlier than anticipated. That's a lot. Didn't take too much time. Start timing these.
And we can have a game.
Yeah, I'd like to retire before get my statements done.
Any other questions or comments about the process manual? So we can move on to update 2022-002, parking in Old Town, review document.
I'm supposed to say something on this?
Your name's on it.
You're the only one who understands this.
Well, the idea was somebody asked me to present information showing what the downtown parking structure was laid out to be, whether it met the criteria and how that was being done. Well, there it is. And if you understand the plans, the spacing is set up correctly for, as far as setback between curb line to curb line, even on these Wonder curbs, which are rollover curbs, flat and everything like that for phase one. The intersection of curb lines, distance back, these do meet the parking standards as far as being set back 25 feet. The issue is, okay, well, how do you stop people from ignoring those and then parking in on top of the other, colored brick areas or colored concrete areas, which is really outside of the parking. Well, I can tell you on phase two, that's not going to happen because we changed from the winter curve, which is basically a very flat roller curve. You can't really feel it, to a curve situation. And so there is a curb line that is 90-degree angle at the end, which basically demarcates where the curb face, the parking zone would be allowed from the intersection of those two streets. And people know they've hit the end of it because it's going to be a jarring bump and going up and over and everything else. So it's a mishmash. Phase two improvements were painted and striped because we knew that if we wanted to change it at any point in time, we wanted that ability. Phase one, locked in stone with the installation of those concrete block, Belgian block parking stall demarcation. So if you want to change how those work, it's going to be something else. I'm not sure what. Painting them a black color that where it looks like the concrete or something gray color that looks like the concrete, go out and restripe it. But that would have to be on a continuous basis. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that.
I think the question I had was, is it legal to park nose up against the big concrete
No.
signposts?
No, if you look, you'll see the
It's all one
zones.
parking spot.
Yeah, if you look, you'll see that these things have zones. There's a, that 18'9" zone. I didn't color these in, but that zone is basically non-parking, but again, that's where the curb line goes from like, 0 to 6 inches deep. So anybody who wants to go on the second phase, if they want to go over that, they're gonna have to roll over a curb. Phase one is the colored pattern like this. Okay. Those dark squares, that's not a parking zone. That's not where you're supposed to park, but there's no way to stop people who want to park there because there's no demarcation, tactile, whatever. It's, they can roll in and park as close as they want at that point, and there's nothing to tell them not to. So, that's why that's weird. And it doesn't work is because there's nothing really there to stop people from just rolling in and doing it. I took a look at some parking downtown. Even where we had striped parking. I saw one striped parking, one parking stall had a Ford F-250 king cab, crew cab, extended thing, where the guy parked with 1/4 of it extended beyond the parking stall. And his back end was, at least 7 feet away from the end of it. He just ignored it. Further down the street, same street, I saw 2 cars sharing the same parking stall plus half of the other part, plus the part that wasn't part of the parking stall painted. I was gonna take pictures of it and just come in and just throw my hands up. Again, I'm not sure how you're going to control people, except to say, we put these out, you have to know this, and you can't have an excuse for not following what we've got. And we have changed the striping on phase one because we can. We've pushed it back, we've reduced. I've seen cars parking outside of the zones regardless. And it doesn't make any difference. I don't know what to do about that. That's just people's attitudes.
Has that area been, not that you guys have extra time, but has that area been, has patrolled as far as, or ticketed or warnings on some of those vehicles that seem like they're parked too close? Because we talked about that, maybe even before you started attending though.
Speed number 2 for me, so.
Yeah, and so we talked about maybe going more the education route.
For last year.
Yeah, the education route, and maybe, we were talking about it previously, and maybe even some warnings or some reminders on some cars, and to sort of teach and change behaviors.
It can be patrolled, obviously, I think, taking some of the businesses that are down there, you're gonna have a very, turnover type of population that are gonna be there, so you're gonna educate some, I think, but I do, personal opinion, you're gonna have a lot of people that you're not hitting on that repeat for the education, so, but definitely, to go to your question, police department definitely has the ability to be able to patrol down there and be able to mark that. On the sense of regularity, if that, 'cause there's a lot of areas, right, that need checking for parking and things like that. And so we do have, you know, one officer that can work specific to that, but he has a lot of other tasks. Now, the officers are gonna do that time permitting, but they're also gonna be working more in the crime realm of their job. So we have to kind of look at that division of their time. Answering your question a little bit.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah.
we talked about sort of education initially, that, and then another sort of a two-part is maybe even a post, like a reminder post. It's amazing how many people that even that I've talked to in conversation that don't even realize you're not supposed to park close to a stop sign.
Yeah.
And so we also talked about maybe even just an education piece, and if it could potentially be posted by the Sherwood PD, just saying as a reminder.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of people seem like when we've talked about it, they were like, oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And we brought that back even to our police advisory board, and a lot of the police advisory board was like, oh, whoops. You know, because I think people just
Yeah.
don't really know, yeah.
And I think you're spot on, and our police information officer loves these type of opportunities to do something that will be unique and kind of visual, you know, because people kind of, okay, I see now what you're talking about. So, yeah, we can definitely put that in minutes, and we can definitely task that piece out. I think one other part I'd like to put out there and help you out. And if you would all help me out, that first meeting I went to, which was July, the August, right? I thought that there was discussion, we were talking about the aspect that we do have, I don't know if it's phase 1, phase 2, but we do have a stall that is within that 20-foot of the crosswalk. But that's what Captain Carlson was talking about.
Within the crosswalk, but usually.
Setback maybe
you
20
need to-
feet.
Yeah, there's a difference between setback from the crosswalk and setback from the intersection of the curb line extensions. And that's, there lies the conundrum in that, the phase 1 streets basically set it back 25 feet, something like that.
I think, and I don't even, I'm not sure if I understand the terminology 100%, Dustin, I'm an engineer. But I thought Carlson was articulating that we have in essence one stall that is inside of the 20 feet. We do need to, from our perspective, if I'm mimicking what Carlson stated, is that we are not in compliance with our setback from the crosswalk with one parking stall.
Yeah.
I think at the July meeting, we talked about the aspect. Please raise your hand if I'm not remembering correctly. I've been here all about a week, I think, at that point. So, but I think the discussion points were, what do we do to rectify that one parking stall so that we can be in compliance with 20 feet back from that? Discussion points at that time that your committee had were, do we talk about just eliminating the parking stall? Do we talk about those types of things? I know that would have a heavy impact to the businesses down there. And I think there was some wavering on that. I don't know if it was in this meeting or if it was when I talked to Captain Carlson afterwards. I think there were some creative ideas of setting bike racks or whatever in that stall that we need to potentially not have someone parking in, so that we're in compliance with the crosswalk. So I put those things out as reminders and or suggestions and or other unique suggestions to be able to get us in compliance. Because I know, if I'm understanding correctly, it's the stall that it's hard to get rid of. It's because we have brick inlay, right? For the stalls.
Correct.
And so we have to get creative in regards to making sure that it's clear that those are not parking stalls so that we are in compliance. And so what creative ideas do we do, i.e. a bike rack or planter box or whatever, to be able to not eliminate, not make it awkward for the businesses, but also to make sure that we as a city are in compliance. Very good.
And there's technical requirements. If we have a planter box, it can't be over 30 inches in height. including plants, because we don't want it to be in a situation where it blocks our visual corridor around that pedestrian crossing. So there could be things done, I'm sure. I think the biggest issue is of phase one is restriping. That's easy because we can take the stripes up that we have and just reconfigure it. That's not the issue for phase two. We can take up the stripes. Phase one streets, and the difference between the phase two and the phase one is the first streets here that I showed where they've got the actual layout on the drawings with the dimensions. That's the phase two streets. Those are striped. Phase one is the third page in, and it's got my scribbles on some dimensions there. And you can actually see the concrete installations for the stalls.
The brick in that you're talking,
That's correct. That's what this is.
that's phase
representing.
which, phase one?
That's phase one. But phase two, we sort of got away from
It's
it,
painted lines.
painted lines.
Okay,
Yes.
sorry.
So what we do in this zone here, where you've got this and it's less than 20 feet, and I've got it sort of scaled out, it's like 8 feet. What do we do with that if the concrete is, how do you mask that? How do you take that out?
Can you any green?
You could paint it gray constantly, but is that going to be enough to keep people from working?
I mean, green. Paint green, like a bike zone.
Oh.
Rack the green bike.
I think you're going to end up doing the same sort of, getting the same sort of result and comments back that you.
You're getting major with it.
I learned that. That was going on before I got here.
Bob, are you able to paint those with red paint or yellow paint in those one stalls, even though they have the inlay brick? Or the stall inside of the
I would
two
have to
bricks?
talk to see
And
what's,
that be painted and striped off as like no parking,
yeah,
45-degree.
I mean, we can do anything, really, striping is, it's gonna be coming down to, do you want to, how much is Public Works gonna wanna go out and refurbish this stuff?
Yeah,
And, what's legal? If it's gonna be, we're not gonna put it red, we're gonna put white. It's gonna be a no parking zone,
right,
it's gotta be signed. There's gonna be costs associated with putting it in and keeping it,
right.
and then you're still gonna have to monitor.
Right, so from the police department's perspective on this, it's a risk factor in regards to it being non-compliance with the crosswalk. So from the police department's perspective, it's something that needs a recommendation in regards to a solution. And I agree with Bob that painting and repetitive painting can be something that can be difficult for a city to deal with. So from the police perspective, we'd ask that you think of recommendations that could be anything from that to the planter box concept, to a bike rack that's blocking it so the car can't be there, to whatever else you come up with. But from our chair here, to be able to say why we're sitting here on the committee, it's to say, is this a problem? Is it not? Is it a risk? Is it not? Is it compliance? Is it not? And that's a two-tone from us. But from the police perspective, it's not in compliance with the crosswalk. It needs a solution, and so we look for you to think of a solution. And then Bob, is it appropriate for this team for that for a solution? That's not a TPF or
I think the first questions that you're gonna get back are gonna be, what's the incident rate of any accidents that have occurred because of
like the number of accidents.
number of accidents, pedestrian injuries, things like that. If you don't have it, I think the pushback is gonna be, why am I expending or expanding my use of limited resource funds on maintenance for something that has never occurred?
To be honest, I feel like my thought is for where that has to be. Again, it just from what I've seen, keep it simple, you put a 2-inch signpost and move, like, say the one that's right out front here, in front of out at First and Pine, that last spot, right at that spot is a signpost that says 2-hour parking, right in front of it. So you move that sign back to the edge of it and put 2-hour parking with an arrow this way, and another sign that says no parking with an arrow that way. Keep it simple, and people will see that, and if they park where there's no parking, you don't have to do a bunch of fancy stuff, it's just there's a perfect sign that's legal, it says, it's red, that says no parking with an arrow that way, and above it, a sign that says 2-hour parking with an arrow that way.
I don't disagree with you, and I disagree with you that the concept is simple, but the attitudes around that, I can tell you that we've got those signs up all over town, parking between the two signs, not supposed to occur. And I can go out there and I can say, I've got 4 cars parked in this one zone just because they.
But at least if the signs are there, it gives these guys.
Then it just becomes a compliance issue.
Yeah.
I
So
know,
I'll put it, I need to inject at this point on this one. So, I agree with you 90% of the time, putting a sign is the right appropriate thing. Us doing the monitoring of it and then putting people into compliance is our job, and that works. For us in this instance, it becomes challenging, if I understand it correctly. I wish we had a big grease board in here. Just visual that way, but that stall, if I'm correct, has the bricks that make it look like it's a parking stall.
Yeah.
So for us, from law enforcement, Chris can attest to this. If we have a sign that says parking this way, yes, no parking that way, 100% correct, okay, yeah, we could write a ticket. The issue for us becomes then is that we then fight that ticket in court due to the fact that the person says you have a sign that says no parking this way, but you have a parking stall that is clearly marked just like the rest. And it's just one of those things where it makes it very difficult for us in court. Chris, thoughts on that? Yeah, you're conflicting then, so we would want to have that sign. I think your idea of a sign is a good idea that says no parking that way. But you would need to do something to change that stall from looking like every other parking stall.
Being that there's the flat curb there, can you paint that one section of little strip of flat curb red? I mean, it might be loud and look ugly, but can you do that no parking, then just paint that, because that's pretty visual. It's a pretty visual cue at that point. You can't park it because there's the bricks that sort of outline it being a parking spot. But right after that is the big concrete stop sign and the crossing. So there's no more bricks really after that. It says this is the other part of the parking spot. So if you take that thin flat curb and make that red, you have the no parking there. It's pretty visual at that point.
I understand what you're saying, okay.
You're smarter than me. I'm just
No,
trying
it's
to
not,
think.
it's not that, it's just my experience.
I'm trying to keep it.
There
like-
is a curb line right here in front of City Hall
Yeah,
that is painted red. We have striping in front of it. It's a fire zone. Come out here 10 o'clock to noon, 2 o'clock to 3. Count how many cars are parked out front of there. The engine's running, sometimes not. Sometimes people in the car, sometimes not, but they're there.
Yeah.
And it's red,
Yeah.
and it's striped.
you're right.
The positive.
I'm trying to figure out, how do we do stuff that changes people's behavior, makes them knowledge that they're responsible for it, so that it doesn't cost the city tons and tons of money to try and correct for the inconsiderate few.
How many spots are we talking about?
Well, how many intersections that were done with phase 1 of the, I would say there's what, 1, 2, 3 intersections where this occurs within the phase 1. The phase 2, we have more, but those are restriped. Those have been restriped already by Public Works, so that's not a problem. So we're talking about 3 intersections, 4, 12 parking spots that would have to be reconfigured somehow.
Yeah, so we're talking 12. Is the city amenable to 12 low?
I have no idea. The idea is, I don't know. I could tell you that we're not talking about standard engineering things. We're talking about things that don't fit the, my book of, you know, thou shalt do it this way, sort of things.
This is why this one has kind of gone around and around a little bit though, I think,
Gotcha.
because I think, like, we're not entirely sure, because we're not sure, like, would a planter box work, would it not work, would the city pay for it, would they not pay for it? So I think it leaves it in a little bit of a limbo, like, we've kind of come up with some ideas,
Mhm.
but ultimately, we're not sure what the city
I would-
is interested in, and so now it almost, this is just my opinion, but it almost feels like it's to its point where maybe it's now a city review and decision, or not, but because we just kind of keep leaving in the same place.
Yes.
And because it seems like it's been on for quite some time.
Does the committee have a proposal in the past before I was here, in regards to the first and the second on proposal for something?
I think we've just brainstormed and then, you know, we've discussed why certain various things kind of may or may not have worked or been liked, but we're just, this is just me speaking, but I'm no expert, and so I'm not sure, I guess, what the city is interested in or comfortable with, or so that's why then it just seems like it goes a little bit round and round.
And we really didn't have an idea of the quantity of what we're talking about, how many spaces are.
That's what this was
Yeah,
for.
exactly.
Was to say how much
To aesthetic.
impact was there.
Yeah,
My recommendation would be for you to put a recommendation on the table of options, anywhere from striping to physical obstruction of those stalls. And let us then take it forward and see which end of the spectrum is better. Because I don't want to speak for a public works department, because I've spoken with public works departments in the past, and while sometimes, and I think Bob was saying this, while sometimes striping does seem to be like the quickest answer, because it is a good idea what you're providing, it can be a very labor-intensive maintenance thing every year to go throughout an entire city. You know, we think of it in just the singularity of it, but to do all that repainting can become costly, and it's the time, right? So I think my recommendation would be to come up with a proposal here of something from here to here that you'd like us to go to the rest of the city and see.
Yeah.
Something off the wall. What does it take to have a part-time meter person to go around to these?
Way more than a planter box.
Yeah, big one of the planter boxes.
Yeah, it would be,
Part-time?
yeah, with benefits, et cetera, it would be a huge expenditure. Not to say that the city won't eventually need additional, or the police department will need additional people that work in those roles than what we have currently, but yeah, it's not, we don't have the FTE positions, full-time employee positions for that at this point.
So what I'm hearing basically is we should, from what I've heard, there's a few different possibilities, and that's sort of what we should recommend having, discussed above us. Possibilities of signs, stripes, planter boxes, and bike racks. Those are the four things that I think have been kind of gone around so far. Is there anything else that would be a possibility to look at? That we could recommend? It's like, take a look at this, and then, if you have more ideas, come up with something better.
There's always more. My mind is going two ways. Number one is justification. Whatever you recommend is going to be backed up by the police department saying that there is an issue. That's number one.
Which we have and are.
And that is what the city manager is going to want. Number one. Number two, options that can be utilized that don't cost a lot of money, don't take a lot of maintenance requirements. just an oddball thing for me would be taking the wheel stops. We have the yellow, or we have the concrete wheel stops, like parking lot stops. And we glue those down to the concrete. Now that could define the first part, the end point of the first parking stall on each place. And it doesn't take a lot of maintenance. It's colored gray. It would take care of that.
So I think,
I'm not thinking that people want to drive over these things. They don't want to drive over them here. That's what they're designed to prevent. The question is, how do you establish the other parking stalls? After that would be restriping, and people just learn to ignore the concrete blocks, red blocks, whatever they are, in the concrete, and we highlight them just like with the striping, and that defines it. But that might be an alternative, is to have those wheel chocks put in, defining the end point of that stall away from the thing.
Certainly make it a lot harder to park in between it.
Yes.
Unless you're an amazing parallel parker. Because you have to literally go
Yeah.
through the stop sign and then back up into it, up to that curve that you put in, so.
Yes, and then even then, I would still say that the police would still want to put some signage there that gives the police the right to, for those people who feel privileged enough to have a small Miata, feel that they can park there. Give them the right to go over there and say, oops, sorry.
I think if you give us the recommendations of anything, if this is what you want, but if you do want something, if you give us that recommendation, you move for it, for anything from paint to physical barrier, and give us that flexibility to find what that looks like, anything from, we don't need to nuance out, I think, in your proposal that it's bike racks or
Like a wheel stop.
a lot of wheel stops or what, but if you just tell us that you want something from signage to paint to physical barriers, you give us that ability to work something up that works for the city. Then you're doing what you said, moving
Yeah.
this off the agenda.
It seems like that would be, but at least it's that we're agreeing and we're
Yeah.
listening to your feedback, but then it does seem like that just the ultimate decision of the resolution
Yes.
is really with
We'll
the city.
find it, yeah.
It's with the city manager.
Yeah,
For the signage, we'd have to update, so it'd be signage and anything in combination with striping or physical barrier to mark the spot, because if the signage is in the wrong place, then
Signs too.
the signs will have to be moved regardless, right? So
Yes.
we'd recommend signage and in combination with a painted or physical barrier to block the parking.
Correct.
Usually 2-inch signposts are cheap.
Yeah.
I think there's ways of doing it, the planter box, again, personally, I like the boxes. That would be great. I like the European style, but that doesn't work around here that well. And I think to avoid that, there are options available that we can put in that would definitely create the barrier at a low cost, low maintenance requirement, which would gain support.
Right. Well, I would move that we recommend to the city that they review for each parking area as appropriate, physical barriers, be it planter boxes, bike racks, or wheel stops, striping, or signage.
I'll second. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, say nay. Great. Mark that off our list. Yay,
So we'll close with a recommendation to the city manager.
yes. The last, new business, I don't think that we can do because Chair Works isn't here. Like, Cindy, so it says he's supposed to forward possible solutions and ideas to be shared with the city staff.
Bob, I'm gonna be away on that particular one.
Wait till next month. Yeah.
City staff is working on a white paper that we're going to present to the city manager, public works director already. So we have an idea and I think it's going to work fine. So,
Can you give us an
well, I think what they're looking at is just removing the stop bars from Ped Crossing. That way, the traffic is not going to view it as a stopping zone, common stopping zone. It's going to be just a Ped zone crossing. Now, I don't necessarily agree with the fact that based on the signalization and the striping, that it meets the standards without the stop bar. So there's some liability the city's going to assume. And in conjunction with that, we're probably going to prevent the crossing from Walmart to Target.
By cars.
By cars. So they won't need to make that left-hand turn either way. And that's going to reduce that left turn movement from, it's going to stop the left turn movement from either parking lot out onto Langer Farms Parkway. So if you eliminate this left turn, there's no more possibility of T-bone.
You're talking both exits from Target or just the one closest to the crosswalk?
The-
You got the one at Red Robin and you got the one at.
The Red Robin one, my advice for that one is to turn it into a right in, right out.
I just thought that was too close to TSR.
It is.
Go up, turn around, and roundabout.
Yes. So basically, that's what we're recommending, so that the head crossing doesn't shift location. It does change in that people they don't need to treat it like a stop because there's no stop bar there. It just acts as a head crossing when the lights are on. And that there's no left turn movement, which conflicts with all the traffic movement if there's a ped in there or if there's not a ped in there. It just basically prevents that T-bone. Guaranteed, we're gonna get some comments.
Well, that's not gonna be a
Yeah,
problem. They
just-
so many people turn left, all directions there.
It's not just the drivers who are gonna complain, it's gonna be the businesses. And that will be the decision on whether or not we have any whether we have a political stand to actually weather that.
They'll still be able to turn left into.
Correct.
parking areas. They just won't be able to turn left out onto Langer.
That is something we'll have to look at. Got to remember, the roadway does not have a center line. It has 2 lanes this way, 2 lanes this way. There's no center turn. If I remember correctly, the way Langer Farms Parkway is built up. So if we have no center.
Left-hand turn lane.
There's a
You're
center.
going in.
Is there a center, is there a center divider? Then-
Up towards the traffic circle.
Yeah, that's.
Hang on, I'm looking right at the,
Bolton, Sherwood, up, there's no. Bob's correct.
yeah, that's 2 lanes. That is correct, there is just 2 lanes each direction. So if we're preventing the turn, how are we gonna get that turn lane from left turn to come in at that intersection? Because it's not enough room, we have to widen the road. We'll restrike the road, no, that's not gonna work either. Basically, you take the left turn out. Is there
Because people
a,
coming from 12 and Sherwood, that are going into Walmart get in that middle lane right away. So if you're on Langer and you want
Okay,
to
I
use
see it, I see
that
it.
lane to turn left into that Red
Yeah.
Robin
Then
entrance,
that-
I've almost
that
been
will-
hit so many times.
Then what we'll do is we're gonna be putting up, candlesticks and providing the turn lane movement so that the left turn remains to each thing, going left into Target, left into Walmart. But you won't be able to come out of Walmart or Target and make a left-hand turn onto Langer Farms Parkway from either parking lot.
It'll be interesting to see how you prevent that.
So candlesticks. That's the best we can do with that one. I think that if we weren't to a permanent solution of trying to put up like a curve, we have to widen, we have to provide extra space, that's not gonna fly. Candlesticks are the narrow option. Are we gonna have people that blow through those? Yes. Are we gonna have to maintain them? Yes. At that point, if there's an accident because of the people blowing through those things, then they need to get dinged to no end. But we're trying to correct some bad driving habits. And even in good driving habits, that intersection is challenging.
Interesting thing that when the police department did the analysis of that whole roadway there, regards to the accidents, we had accidents at that intersection necessarily. Other than, there was the one from 5 years ago. But when you really read the report and the nuances of it, it has really nothing to do with anything we're talking about. So going back to what we talked about even earlier in the day, when you're making changes and you're looking at changes, why are we making the changes and what are the impacts? Why are we doing it, right? And so from our seat here, we don't have data to provide you that says that we have a high accident rate there at that intersection. Now, with that said, we did do some very, very rough, when I say rough, very, very rough data collection of watching that intersection and seeing what the behaviors were over a very short period of time. Nothing that's going to meet any standard of requirement for doing a good study. I put that out there. With that said, of the short period of time that we did a study and watched 30 cars successfully navigate that intersection going into Walmart and the Target there, and just free flowing and in essence knowing what they were doing, right? The behavior of the drivers where they knew what to do and there wasn't an issue. And in that same time period, we had 12 cars that stopped or came to a close stop at the non-stop stop signs that are there. And produced, you could clearly watch the driver in the car having a mental juggernaut in regards to it. And I can attest, I'm one of those people that has that juggernaut. So my point is that of a small period of time, 30 cars were able to successfully get it right. 12, that's a lot. We're sitting there thinking they have to stop or do something related to stopping. That's a hazard when I see numbers that are like that. I'd like to press that out more and I see, but in just a short period of time, it tells me that those signs are not being helpful. Now, to go to Bob's point, Bob's the engineer, not my role, but it may be a requirement, it may not, and that's something that.
This is
the
one of those
city has to
cases
look
where
at.
I agree that the design criteria doesn't necessarily work. It just happens to hit that type of weird Bermuda Triangle thing where all the engineering in the world is not gonna come out and give you a solution that really is.
Human nature shows.
It's one of those weird sections where like a lot is coming out, I think, a driver at once.
Yeah.
Really without a full, everything that you're seeing at once without coming to any kind of a full stop, you have a lot coming at you, I think. And
I
again,
think that
I talked about this teaching teenagers to drive in that section, they were like, yeah.
Yeah.
And one of them almost hit another car in that section, like,
all-
just because there's
It's all good drivers.
so many, yeah,
the
there's so
fact
much
that it's not an intersection as described by public roadway intersections. It's a public road with two driveways coming out onto it at the same point. You know, had I had 20, well, if I was able to make any distinction, I might have changed that into an all-way intersectional, stop intersection, signalized or not, at that point. At least try to do something different. But that's 2020 hindsight. But the clarification should be that people have to understand that it is not a public intersection, roadway intersection. It is a roadway where two driveways come out into it, and the people exiting from the driveway have the prima responsibility of making sure that they can enter traffic safely.
If you can see improvement, if those two signs are removed with the stop
With the stop
here,
bars.
stop.
And we put up the
And you
candles.
take out the stop lines as well.
Yep.
If you take that stuff out, I'd be really curious to see 6 months down the road if you're even needing to actually progress to look through onlys and et cetera, or if it actually produces some clarity to that intersection.
I think this is one of those cases where we could face it and see where the most appropriate stop point is with the improvements.
I think that's actually what that would be my recommendation from the police perspective. Chris, what are your thoughts?
Stop line, might have to be skipped. Put a patrol car there and watch out when you keep giving the oh shoot. You don't have to. Or how many people stop and then a car will go to leave Target and then cars coming from the roundabout almost T-bone them because they're like, well, wait a second, why is that car pulling out in front of me? Because people coming from 12 Church Road stop at that stop line when they don't have to, which gives this person in the Target parking lot, oh, they're stopping for me, so now I can go.
Yeah.
Cars coming this way, they're not stopping because they don't have to. I can sit there and shake my head all day long. And like I said, put a patrol car there, marked or not, and people, just the look on their faces says it all.
And this is why I wanted Chris to be at these meetings. So he sees it, right? As a captain, I'm gonna be out a little bit, but keyword is a little bit, right? I'm in the office, so I'm not gonna see it. And it's good to have Chris here. I wanna throw something out. I'll put my hand up so that Bob has the opportunity to slap it if it seems like it's the wrong thing to say. Since you're doing such a good job at like knocking things off your agenda, do you want to put a recommendation out by your committee in regards to doing what you're just saying, which is a phased approach?
At this point,
Recommending the signage.
we're already doing a white paper to the city manager, which incorporates what I just told you.
Okay.
So, you know, you can, I would say your recommendation is that the city staff continue with trying to find a solution to this thing, and that you support what the city staff comes up with, which is, we aren't doing nothing, we're gonna do something.
Right.
Well, at next meeting, will you be able to present the white paper to the committee? Because I know.
Will you be here?
Yeah, well,
Next
that's,
meeting.
okay. Forget you then.
He needs to retire, yeah.
The reason I ask is, I know that Jason has a lot of concerns on this issue, like.
Jason's working on this, he's putting the white paper together, it's well, it's almost written up, completed, he's met with the police department.
I met with Jason out there.
And I think that what we're trying to do now is we just have to get a meeting up with the city manager when we get back in office so we can sit down with him, go over what we're recommending, get the costs associated with that, and get the public works department basically to see if it's feasible from their maintenance funds, because there's nothing else that we've got. So if it's not something that is doable in the maintenance fund for this year, this fiscal year, we'll have to see, because I think, you know, there's always the budget cycle where they go for a mid-year budget amendment and change something, we can allocate funds or something like that, but I think it's something that the city manager is a solution to. complaints. I don't think the police department want any more complaints. I'm tired of that situation occurring. And I think it does need to be, taken care of. But I think that support for what the engineering department is putting forth is really what you can, chime in. Leave the technical side up to us to figure it out.
Is Jason doing that work as
Yes.
part of like this committee or as part of his like?
No, he's been directed to,
Or is it Jason, your civil engineer?
he's my civil.
Oh,
Yeah,
not
that's
Jason,
Jason,
work.
the sheriff, and then
Oh.
Jason, the civil engineer, so, or.
I'm directing somebody else?
Yes, like Christine Jason.
Yeah, no, Jason Waters is a civil of the city. He's under my, I want to say control, but not really, because we work as a team. But he's been directed to handle this, and he's kept informed. We've talked about it. He's going through the process, and I think that we're very close to presenting to the city manager for his discretion on what we want to do, where we want to go, and what options, because we've got a lot of other options available. They aren't as, I want to say acceptable. Yeah, I think acceptable. This one that I've discussed right now is probably what I've heard is the latest, and I think that it has merit.
Keep it simple.
As simple as we can. Everything after that starts to really get complex and expensive.
Signals, hog signals, all kind of fun stuff.
I mean, I can't imagine this committee not being supported, but I like our Jason being involved.
Well, that's a problem with that. I think that's the idea is, but the only thing I'm saying is let the engineering department figure out what the solution is. Don't try and dictate to the engineers what we should be doing.
I don't want us to be snarky, but didn't get correct the first time, right? So,
The first time we went through, you're asking about what that was installed at, because that was not the incident that occurred there, the death, was further up on the roadway, wasn't at that intersection. Number one. The installation of that signal really wasn't predicated on solving a pedestrian crossing issue at that location.
Well, even the way it is now, you've said multiple times, technically it's correct. From a technical and
Technically,
engineering standpoint, there's nothing wrong with it as it stands.
The roundabout design and the
Yeah.
crossing was all done to engineering standards, federal standards, FHWA standards. And it was designed by transportation engineers. So none of us clowns in the engineering department really, put our finger on that. Not that we can't, but we went to the professionals. I don't think you're gonna find anybody else between the two engineering firms that we used. You've probably got the first and second best engineering firms, transportation engineering firms, definitely on the West Coast and probably within the United States. So I don't have any problem with what they've come up with for answers in support of what was put in. I think that like I've said before, nothing's 100% perfect. There's no way an engineer can take care of everything. We try for 80%. We hit 85%, we've done a damn good job. But we can't deal with the anomalies that come out. There's always gonna be anomalies.
So Mike, were you suggesting that maybe we leave it open until Chair Jason can at least not review what the city's doing, but at least it to understand that before we close it without him being here? Is that? Okay.
So you're waiting, you know, talk about it
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, and, I mean, I'd love to see the white paper. That's,
Well, it's gonna be, we're gonna put it out there. I think it's appropriate to say, this is what we're doing, folks. I don't like this particular one in what we're proposing. It's gonna be made public. It's gonna have to be made public. I think that there's gonna be a lot of discussion and pushback against it. But I think it's gonna be a balance of
we're
public
just gonna
safety
say,
versus.
yeah, we didn't want to do this, but Bob, you know.
Retired.
Well,
Yeah.
I expect that to occur, yes. And I'm not infallible. So, you know, that's the way it works, that's the way it works. But I think we've done a really good job of trying to address the situation over time as best we can, based on the directives we've received.
Just move that we delay that until next meeting.
Second,
Well, all three of them, you cleared too, so you're doing really good.
Do we need to vote on tweeting? Any other committee comments?
Couple questions. So so Bob, you're retiring. Is there, is there a replacement or do you have any? Is the job posted or will somebody else be joining our meetings moving forward?
The job was posted once. The applicants, they went through the first round of discussions, interviews. And then, from my understanding, is that they had 2 applicants that proceeded out of that to the final, but the final has not, final interviews have not occurred. And I don't know the reason why or the status of that. I think that it's safe to say that you'll all hear about it and they decide to release it to the public. But that's as far as I know. Right now, things are at that phase, and I don't see anybody coming on board before I'm here.
Will there be an interim you at our meetings until the person is hired?
I think
Will Jason be able to join?
Whoever gets assigned to it will probably come from the Public Works Director, who is my boss at this current phase. So I look at him to decide who makes the decision of coming here and representing the engineering department. It's not a call at this point. Thank you. That's as far as I can.
How many applicants were for John?
I believe the last number I had was 7, and they interviewed 4 out of the 7 for the initial phase, with 2 proceeding into final interviews. And that's where it's at right now, is I do not know the status, I don't know what's going on. And there's nothing I can say about it, it's definitive. That's with HR, city manager, Public Works Director, that one, it's out of my hands. And I have intentionally kept away from it.
I had other kind of random thoughts, and we don't have to discuss it tonight, because it's so late already, but I saw the community enhancement grants. I know the application deadline closed, I think it was the 15th, but I was wondering if this is something that our committee would want to look into or doing, but doing, I've seen other cities and I've, been a part of in other areas where you do like a painting as far as like in the public right of way. And it could be like a community art thing. I've seen different like crosswalks being like designed and striped, or even just different pavement markings in areas where there's a lot of kids and community gathering spaces and local intersections, or even like cul-de-sacs. So I thought that might be something fun for us to do and to kind of maybe think about providing an opportunity if like neighborhoods or communities wanted to do something like that, and didn't know if that's something that we could help structure or create or provide guidance on, just to, you know, just create art in the public right of way and, you know, hopefully also slow people down that are driving on the streets. To show that it's a place that people, you know, play and whatnot. And then, yeah, so that I was thinking, I'm like, oh, we should apply to that grant. I know that ended. I don't know if there's gonna be more opportunities for those grants, but I also know we've got a little bit of funding, or if even just providing that as an option to folks. But I didn't know, I assume there's a legal way to do it and that it's not illegal as long as we get some kind of permit or work with the city since it's in the public right of way, and then the paint would, you know, we would have maintained it, it would just be art, and in future years, you know, communities and neighborhoods could repaint it if they want to, but. I don't know, Bob, is that something that we can do, or like, is there like a permit process we have to go through?
Art in the public right of way. Art in, I've seen crosswalks, 3D, realistic.
Rainbow crosswalks.
Yes. Things that look like they're stepping on elevated stones and stuff like that. And I saw the report of, they did an analysis of that over time, where they had it in the public crossing. And they went and they said, okay, in the daytime, looks realistic, actually gets people's attention. And then they came at it on a nighttime, it was raining, dark, and shown streetlights and things like that, and it just didn't work. So there were some discussions around the appropriateness of that type of scenario within the public right of way. I would say it's appropriate for pedestrian corridors. Definitely, we do have pedestrian corridors in town that can utilize that sort of stuff. But I don't believe that it would be appropriate to place that type of artistic bent for actual traffic control of active roadways.
Yeah, I was thinking more like residential, local streets that where there hopefully isn't a lot of vehicle traffic and it's slow speeds, but yeah, just as like a community building traffic awareness.
Again, I have a problem with the concept of artistic going into technical crossing requirements in the right of way. Anything that's within the right of way that would detract from the safety on a 24/7 basis that is not maintained.
Can I ask you a question? Was it a state grant or federal grant? What, do you
It was
know
a
by chance?
city grant. It was like the communities, it was in the city, in the weekly city email newsletter thing.
Community block grant.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
the deadline was.
Again, I don't have problems with art or artistic interpretations, whatever you want to do, in certain conditions. My opinion for public thoroughfares, the streets, the roadways, putting art objects in the middle of that artistic expression, you could detract the driver from appropriately maintaining his focus, which is trying to avoid people and other objects. Now, I'll admit I'm a curmudgeon. That's my nickname around here is Mr. No. So I will.
That's not what we call it.
Good. But I really, I'm open to having artistic expressions like that in the appropriate environment where it can be enjoyed, but not creating the possibility of having an issue that comes about. The roadways are, you know, designed for getting car A from point A to point B within a car. And everything else is to prevent that car from hitting somebody or something within the roadway. And if we add things to that roadway system that detract from the driver's ability to positively maintain focus at any point in time, I start to cringe. Now, that's just me.
Okay.
Doesn't mean the community won't override me. That's fine. They can do that. Other communities have done it. I've seen it. I've looked at it. That's why I went and looked for what did they do in the long run? How did it respond? It wasn't necessarily favorable in a traffic condition. That's why I'm saying, you know, in the right area, it would be fantastic. Definitely support it. The Pet Bridge. I don't know. If you want to freak people out that I would be agreeable upon, take the Pet Bridge and then right over the highway, paint it 3D realistic. It's right down to the ground.
You're walking on cars.
Walking on air to point B.
Well,
And
you-
then-
I'd be amenable to that because basically the pets can sit there. But it's not gonna detract from anybody's safety between a car and a pet.
So he says he's the engineer, no, and I'm officer, yes. So, so my response to it from the police department perspective on this, because I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea. I don't necessarily think it's a good idea. I'm just kind of in the middle. And I say that because and the reason I asked you about the grant is that it kind of goes to a little bit of what Bob's saying. So if we are going to make a change to something that could impact the safety of a pedestrian going across, you know, that safety aspect, when it's a grant that's specifically for that, for art, for doing the crosswalks and stuff, and it is backed by the state or the feds, or a grant for that, I'm on board.
Yeah.
Because then I know I have that backing and it doesn't matter what my opinion is or what Bob's is. It really then has the backing of a lot of entities and a lot of 3 digits well beyond my pay grade. And so I'm 100% for it. So if you can find a grant, so put a bow on this, if you can find a grant that supports this and it's supported by the state level grant or federal grant, yeah, I'll be on board
Okay, cool.
for it.
That's a great idea. And then one last thing, the Cedar Creek grand opening is this weekend, I saw it Saturday.
Mhm.
So folks are planning on going, but
Police department will be there.
Hey, that's a hell of a trail. It's worth a lot of money and it's a lot of pain getting it there. Go walk it.
How long is it?
I've ridden it all the time.
Take all the twists and turns. Goes from downtown. That's phase 1. Of which I'm not gonna be around. I've said that.
Do we have any citizen comments?
No additional on.
There's nothing else, we can adjourn.
With that said, before you adjourn,
Oh, sorry, take
I would just like to say, at least on the police department's behalf, we'd like to say big thanks to the engineering department, specifically Bob, to being here and giving us all his expertise. I know that myself, and I'm sure Chris, similar to me, we have expertise in what we do, in regards to contributing to the meeting from the perspective of what we see and what we acknowledge and see what's happening there, but you're not gonna have a successful team if you don't have an engineer that has the expertise to be here. So I would say from the police department's perspective for this meeting, thank you, Bob, for being on this team. Only here with you the 2 meetings, but thanks for that. For being here each month. Engineering department appreciates Bob being here too, probably because they can be home watching a game or something. But with that said, from what I hear from a squirrel that was talking in my ear, there is cake and ice cream in the fridge for everybody because Bob's leaving, so.
Oh, nice.
Wow.
Shout out.
Did I get that great energy? Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
So before you leave.
Yeah.
Can we sit down?
Chalk it up and say, no more Mr. No.